regional development with robotics, or regional development for robotics. And I was thinking about somewhat trying to end with some critical remarks, maybe to help in the formulation and organization of maybe the next round of funding programs under FP9. And so this will be mostly a discussion. I have in mind, speaking myself, only 20 minutes. Then Edgaras Leiteris will speak from an experience from creating a hub in Lithuania. Somewhat, I would say, under severe conditions, historically, to set up a digital innovation hub in robotics. And then I would like to open the discussion first with the moderators of the previous sessions, Anna and Tilo, and then, of course, with the audience. So at the end, I'm collecting ideas, suggestions for maybe inputs to the Commission for the next round of funding programs. Okay. My title is a reflective introduction. And the chapters I have chosen is History of Regions and Robotics, EU initiatives. The third is Innovation Processes in Regions, the Common Good and Social Innovation, opposed to technological innovation. I would like to cover a little bit the Nordic models, and then suggestions for an action plan is the discussion with you. So, history of regions and robotics. I was trying to figure out what happened for the last 20 years. And the first thing that came to my mind was the term cluster. I remember the cluster policy in several European states and even provinces, because there was an idea that the technological development was not sufficient for economy and welfare of the population, and new structures for innovation had to be looked at. And so very soon, after a certain cluster policy was discussed, especially in Denmark, in Austria, and also in southern Germany, Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg, so-called official cluster policies were issued by the governments, and very soon clusters on robotics developed. These clusters, if you want, are forerunners of digital innovation hubs. These clusters were meant to combine research, universities, and SMEs, with some respect also larger companies, but mainly to start in or accelerate the innovation processes in robotics. So if you look into maybe Google, you find robotics clusters, Upper Austria, very important, very many members, a mechatronic and robotics cluster in Bavaria, about 35 SMEs, plus research, plus universities. You also find, of course, the Danish RoboCluster, which was a cluster. And the term cluster was actually the one which was chosen in those days. It was always meant to be an innovation cluster. Now, almost 10 years later, regions and robotics became a topic under the European Robotics Forum. And I think the first one was in Västerås in Sweden, because the Robodalen was an example of a RoboCluster. And 1 year later, we have the European Robotics Forum in Odense. And of course, the Danish RoboCluster was in the center of our focus. And we could see what happened in those areas, in those regions. We could see how small startups, SMEs, small companies, micro companies, the university or universities, education system, and especially together with the administration of the region, were working together, providing the technology transfer center, providing a framework which was helping those elements, those members of the cluster, to cooperate. And I found one item was very interesting. It's that these are all the small companies who are competing in Odense or in Restaurants. They are competing. However, they also work together. So when there's a large project, they were sharing the project and dividing this into, okay, you are in charge of, let's say, programming the robot, you are in charge of the mechatronics, and you are in charge of the mobility. So they were working together, and they were sharing new ideas. So I thought this was a very hopeful innovation process, these clusters. And so the idea was to see how we can transfer this idea of robotics clusters into different regions of Europe. Now, in 2013, to make it complete, the European Robotics Week was focusing exactly on regions and robotics. So when I look at what has the European Union been doing, the first thing what comes to my mind is actually the cohesion policy. Not so much the digital innovation hubs, but it's the cohesion policy. What is cohesion? Cohesion is defined in the Single European Act, which is 1986. I read it, reducing disparities between the various regions and the backwardness of the least favored regions. And then later the Lisbon Treaty adds another facet to cohesion, referring to economic, social, and territorial cohesion. So this means there is a contract, a European contract of the European Union, all members have signed. It is to make sure that the disparity between the rich and the poor levels out, of course, towards the rich, not to the poor. So this was the initiation of several funds, the European Structural and Investment Funds, which consist of, you can check it, the ERDF, which is the Regional Development Fund, the Social Fund, and the Cohesion Fund. And the budget for these funds between 2014 and 2020 was, well, believe it or not, 350 billion euros. Now, maybe you know, there's a discussion, has this policy been successful? Has it actually leveled out rich and poor countries in Europe? Has this money helped? And this is a fierce debate, because there are some people who have taken advantage, some regions have taken advantage, and there are some who are still struggling with unemployment. If you look at the statistics about, this is the innovation performance in the European Union, you see a vast discrepancy between the, let's say, the modest innovators, which is a euphemistic term. I mean, we could say almost no innovation in that country on the left-hand side, and the innovation leaders on the right-hand side. Why is this is still the case? Why is it, in spite of the Cohesion Fund? If I look at the unemployment rate, on the left-hand side, it's the unemployment rate in general, and on the right-hand side, it's even worse. It's the unemployment rate of the youth. You see the differences between 7.7%, I'm looking at the right-hand side, and 61% unemployment of the youth. So, what's going on? Are these 350 billion euros which have been spent on cohesion policy, or which will be spent by 2020 for the last 6 years, will they do anything different? So what's your guess? Now the question is also, what is robotics doing? What can we do with robotics in order to alleviate the situation? Now, there is some confusion if you go through the papers, and sometimes I feel, I have to say, when the Commission says, well, if you want to create a digital innovation hub or cluster, you have to work together in a region. The SMEs, the Chamber of Commerce, the universities, the administration, the technology transfer center, you have to work together. Now, I say the Commission has to work together in order to come up with a policy which is really successful. Because one hand sometimes does not know what the other hand is doing and funding. So there are a lot of special programs, and I'm just mentioning the ones from the Cohesion on smart specialization. This is all taken into a policy, which was, the latest one was established in 2011. You can see it. It's the S3P, the Smart Specialization Platform. And it is by, this platform is also some sort of a catalog. And then it is the JRC is taking care of this. But I think the last point is interesting. There is a Stairway to Excellence program, which is to combine the structural and investment funds with Horizon 2020, or if you want, with the robotics funding program. Now, this is an issue which has been discussed from the very beginning. Of course, for Horizon 2020, we were told this is the first time we can combine cohesion funding and Horizon 2020. This should be a good idea. Cohesion funds would be, for example, to build a technological transfer center, technology transfer center, or you could build some infrastructure for your region, and then you have on top the Horizon 2020 project. So this would be nice because robotics is expensive. Robotics requires a lot of machinery, tools. So now this could be done, in theory, could have been paid by the cohesion funds, and then the project by Horizon 2020, AI and robotics. Now, as we know, there is some sort of catch-22, as Americans say. So they are not synchronized, they are not dependent on each other. It's very difficult in practice to get this synchronized to the benefit of a region. Now, in the course of the cohesion policy, the Commission decided to look more at so-called macro-regional programs. This was the new thing, maybe 5 years ago. Macro-regionalized regions should cooperate. So in order to transfer know-how from one region to the other. Okay, so there was the cluster approach for growth. I will make these slides available to everyone. And there's also the co-SME program for SMEs. And then there was the European Observatory for Clusters and Industrial Change. So a cluster policy. So there is a cluster information hub. If you go through this link, you see there's a catalog of clusters. There are how to cooperate with clusters outside your region. So this is still going on. So at the same time, we have clusters on one side and digital innovation hubs on the other side. Sorry, this is... So, I forgo this because this cluster, this is the Brussels conference on clusters. You can go to conferences, you can go on meeting other clusters. I skip this. And there's a map of clusters. Do you remember the map of the digital innovation hubs? So these are the clusters. So I don't want to spend too much time on that. Okay, now we come to the digital innovation hubs, because Commissioner Oettinger was speaking on 14th of April 2015 at Hanover Fair. This has been cited and quoted over and over again because Cecile was mentioning the same. My objective is to have at least one world-class digital innovation hub in every region in Europe. Okay, Now, according to, let's say, the language, it's the digital innovation hub, which is in this focus. In parallel to the clusters, of course, because this is all in parallel. So, innovation processes in a region. This is the third section. Okay, a similar slide has been shown several times. A region consists of university, an idealistic region, let's say, as a technology transfer center, or is going to build one, the Chamber of Commerce, there are startups, SMEs, regional industry, there's a population as well. Interesting. There are schools, university, the Chamber of Commerce in the middle, maybe administration, politicians. And the idea is clear, it's the regional proximity which is going to build some sort of cohesion inside the region. So the idealistic innovation processes in the region are, there is leadership from regional authorities, top down, with goals and charismatic and wise management, a roadmap. We have heard this, the Basque country is doing this as well. We also see there are institutional competencies and resources which are relevant for innovation. For example, the Chamber of Commerce, maybe the university. And there is enough absorption capacity. That is a term of innovation management. What is absorption capacity? Absorption capacity is the term for not only collecting knowledge from others, but also how to put this knowledge into present-time or economic advantages. So this is something else to make sure you can use the ideas. And there's also the idea of having a grassroots innovation bottom-up ecosystem is the term also, for a dynamic structure to build innovation from the bottom. So you have both. From the top down, there's the administration, infrastructure, everything is positive, makes you innovate will help you, and then there's the bottom, creative, and so this is the idealistic regional innovation process. And there's a sharing of tacit knowledge, and this is important, a trust-based relationship, trust between the stakeholders, between the actors. What if the trust does not exist between the Chamber of Commerce and the university? Because this guy is from a different party, or this guy has no idea. He is the wrong person at this position. What if there is no trust because people are stealing ideas? So I think in this idealistic situation, trust is the basis for cooperation. And continue this idea of trust. Because what trust means, we have some value, we share values. So we say there is some sort of common understanding about where we go to, what we are, and we understand not only the functions of the organizations, we have some regional patriotism, okay, but there is no egoist exploitation. There is respect for the common good, and that is the population. It's the population we are working for. It's the welfare. It's the economy, and we believe that welfare comes from economy. And we believe that technology is important for economy. So this is the trust. And the participation of the population is important. Transparency. So tell people what the robots can do and cannot do, to make sure the society takes part. Can you imagine a society, a country, which is not based on trust, where mistrust and egoism is separating fractions in the society? This is not a theory. This is currently, in some states, it's quite obvious. We see divisions in elections. So the society is in danger of splitting. And if there's mistrust between the different parts and sections of the society, can you imagine how innovation is accepted? It's accepted with mistrust. Because, especially when it is a disruptive innovation like robotics. Because then one part of the population will use this as a danger. It's fear, to generate fear. Because, for example, losing jobs. It's very important to make sure that the population is taking part in the innovation process. And the population also understands and also supports the innovation processes. So the more disruptive, the more innovative, if you want, the more fantastic the innovation is, the more fears and the more fake news and the more differences and difficulties will actually occur, such that the society will fall apart. Now, I was talking about human welfare. Now, how do we measure human welfare? Now, there is something which is different from monetary values, which, for example, the GDP is. And this is, for an example, is the capability approach, which was developed by two philosophers many years ago, and it is being developed into so-called Human Development Index and other statistics, this time developed by the United Nations. There's also an IEEE Ethics for Robotics Standardization Committee with a subcommittee 7010. Maybe you know Raja Chatila, he is working in this standardization effort. And this is really interesting because there's a subgroup in the Robotics Standardization Committee working on metrics for well-being, metrics for ethical artificial intelligence and autonomous systems, but it's the metrics. How do we measure well-being? The same idea with the United Nations and the Human Development Index. So if you look at the HDI, Human Development Index, which is somewhat a reflection of the societies in the country, in, I would say, in capabilities of an individual to do something you want. Because you can to go to the university, to start a family, to do something in your profession. The capabilities I have because I'm not under pressure from the party. I'm not under pressure from the part or a section of the society. The society is working on a basis of trust. Then you see here, this is the 2015 data index of the United Nations. Scandinavian countries are top, and unfortunately we still have Montenegro, Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, Albania, Bosnia. So these are the last ones on the European scale. So we have, again, some disparity between, it's not rich and poor, it's between people who have the chance to develop and build under trust and have a democratic society, or mostly democratic. And then there are people in Europe which do not have the chance. So, okay, I'm quickly the Nordic model and social innovation. Social innovation has a longer history. It's you can look it up. It's sociologists and innovation managers have been looking at it. It's different from technological innovation. It's exactly the society, innovation in society, to build trust and to build a democratic system where everybody has a chance, a capability to develop. So there are some countries where the social innovation does not exist, and this is the theory A. When it does not work, then maybe the private people have to work on it. So, the theory A is there is a situation where the public sector supports social innovation. That is the umbrella, the institutions, the parliament, they support social innovation, and then this is one possibility. This is a mistake here. The public sector, so the second one is if this is not working, then maybe there is, this was also mentioned in the morning in the discussion, maybe the private sector has to pick up some ideas and make sure the public sector is changing. However, in the Nordic model, we have a very strong public sector being in charge of being responsible, feeling responsible for social innovation. And you see this example, Denmark, there's a national innovation strategy, support for startups and clusters. So these are all elements of a national situation. This is the beginning of the robo-cluster in Odense, but it spawned into all Denmark, as you may know. And the private sector has the Scandinavian culture of community cooperation. The community is very important in the Scandinavian culture, which helps to build trust and to build innovation. Okay, so my suggestion now is, we discuss now, what type of support should the EU offer? What is the support? Funding or some specific arrangements, structures, administration, nations, the people? What type of support? What are the criteria for receiving support? Let's assume we want to level out rich and poor, or those who are having more chances and opportunities, and those who have less chances and opportunities in Europe. Those where the trust is not working at this moment. What do we do? So the questions I would like to discuss now is, what type of support should the EU offer? What are the criteria for receiving support? Do we spend all money on, let's say, the left behind countries and support only those weak ones where, for example, social innovation is not working at this moment? What is specific about innovation with and for robotics? Why robotics? This has been discussed already several times, but in this context, and do we need to specify technologies and applications for robots? Do we need to say something? We would like to get robotic technology funded for agriculture or and specific type. Should we prescribe this? Or should we prescribe technologies? Should we prescribe this has to be artificial intelligence? Or this has to be, it's not necessarily robotics. It could be components which are also being used for robotics, but not necessarily because they could be used for, let's say, transportation as well. So I would like to, this is my suggestion, we think about these questions, and I would like to ask first, Tilo, where are you? And maybe you can come here and tell us what are your impressions from your sessions this morning. Is there a chance to, can we all together come up with some ideas how to improve the funding system, and what do we have to do? Yeah, come here.
So first of all, Uwe, thank you very much for raising the big questions. Reminds me a little bit of big politics. Personally, I have a small problem that I have to take a flight to the airport near Robodalen, and then to airport of Robocluster, and then to the airport of Cyber Valley. So I basically have 5 minutes maybe, or 10, and then I have to leave. Is it up to me to answer those questions?
Maybe where they're successful, where we have heard successful successful constructions, successful assemblies for digital innovation hubs or clusters.
Okay, so
now, is there anything which would help us to understand how this mechanism can be transferred, let's say, to the disadvantaged countries of Europe?
So this morning I think all of you that were in the session at 8:30 and could listen to Cécile Huet's presentation about the upcoming calls on the digital innovation hubs in robotics. I think Cécile made quite clear what the European Commission is aiming for, and I think those questions are then to be answered by those proposals which are in the making now. For instance, so in that workshop after Cécile's presentation, there was Jon from Tecnalia presenting how the Basque country in northern Spain is making such a roadmap, and I can only guess that Tecnalia will, or some Basque countries will be in at least some of those calls and exchange then with the rest of Europe, and maybe even Basque country officially belongs to those underdeveloped regions. I'm sorry, I'm not totally aware of which. I mean, I only know Tecnalia, Technica, Innovalia, so I cannot imagine that they are underdeveloped. But is there anybody from Basque country you could tell me which European...
Well, Anna knows probably what the situation is.
Well, I don't know. I think Tecnalia is not under development.
No. But the Basque country...
Basque country is not under development.
So I think there are those 5 levels of regions, and I only know that Baden-Württemberg is on the...
No, the question is was there any success story from a poor country, let's say a poor region where unemployment is 50%? Edgaras, could you make yourself ready for your presentation, please?
I think, Uwe, you have opened a new, well, not a new, because of course everybody knows what happens. But in any case, for me, congratulations for your presentation. Let me only say a few words about what happened in the workshop before. I think an ecosystem or a digital innovation hub is something that we know perfectly. The hall that we have here in this building is a ecosystem also. We mix different people there with different objectives, and everybody was happy. The building is perfect. So for an ecosystem, we need a place. We need a place to be, and we need some organization, because the ecosystem is a little anarchic, or is anarchic by definition. So we need organization. I think this is what we need from the EU, from the regions, organization, to do the things in a better way, because I think we can do by ourselves. I can sit with Thilo here and start to speak about, and I think we will arrive to different, but we have to arrive to something that create innovation and that create goods for people and for citizens. So this is what we need, the instruments to do that. And between Thilo and me, between Thilo and the UA, different instruments to make easier our relationships and to understand one each other and to go to objectives.
I suggest Edgaras brings an example from Lithuania. his endeavor to set up a digital innovation hub, or a cluster if you want. Just a few slides, please.
Okay, so as an association, we didn't try to create digital innovation hub. What we tried to talk how to create robotic cluster in Lithuania, and then afterwards we understood that we need some bold strategy. We are small. There are not a lot of companies. But also we have a lot of government support, structural funds, and everything. But we need really to build the community first at an empty place. And what we did, we created and registered Digital Innovation Hub for Robotics. We consider our competitive advantage that we focus on business development side instead of competence center and technology transfer. And how we started, we first looked at the map for robotics in Europe, and we saw that Lithuania, and not only Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, north of Poland was not present at the moment anywhere. And we said, but yes, but we have nearly 15 companies in Lithuania who try to work in that field, so how we shall do. And that was the beginning of trying to force competitors to start talking together with the message how to put Lithuania on the map of robotics in Europe. Why hub? Actually, it was opportunistic go to an open call and reconcile project. We tried to understand all those buzzwords. Locally, a consultancy company was helping us, but in nearly every debate about Digital Innovation Hub, we had such two main questions. So what the Digital Innovation Hub means, and another, what's our value proposition? So not understanding what Digital Innovation Hub means, we concentrated on the second part, so what's our value proposition and to whom? We learned from international partners, from Hofer Institute helped us to build ecosystem mapping, mentors helped us to understand the service. We have visited a manufacture center in Coventry just to understand that no, it's not the way to go for Lithuania. And still, that's how looked our board members. Everybody was skeptical and nobody understood what the Digital Innovation Hub is. Then we started with another simple thing, building our web page, and that's where things started moving forward, because we tried to identify the solutions we are trying to propose. And also we made a template that we don't talk only about solutions, but we also need to talk about customer base and technologies behind those solutions. And that's where companies which are members of a hub started talking to each other, starting better understanding each other, and so on. And also we got a secret weapon. That's Thomas. Maybe you even met him yesterday. He's the Dane by nationality living in Lithuania, and we invited him to chair the association. Why? Because of cooperational attitude, and each board meeting is started with mantra, trust and cooperation, what Uwe was talking about. And also, if we combine that with the solutions we have identified, that we came to the point that maybe we are not competing, maybe we are adding to each other, and that's how really we started building a cluster. And after 2 years, instead of going way as usual, trying to go into one contract by themselves, companies started approaching each other and asking, you have maybe better competence, can we work together on this? And some key lessons to share, especially for those countries who do not have a developed hub. Start with something simple and small. Even the question what to put on our web page can lead to a very deep debates about business model. Also avoid buzzwords. We had a lot of them during those days, and try to match the solutions with the competence you can to offer, and continuously build trust, because it's very fragile, and Each day we need to remind companies that it's not a fight, that it's co-creating value together. And when people are activated and trust starts flowing, you go to another level, like, for example, you can take on challenges. Let's convert old industrial city into robotic mecca. What we tried to do in autumn, we had a kickoff meeting in old industrial city of Panevėžys, and there were several key components. One, that we had already some international network, and you see Untitled from VTT and used from Audience Robotics participating. Also, we had national presence, that means that advisor to the government was participating. But the key element was Major of Panevėžys. That's the guy with the long hair, and he said, probably with my character, it's not long that I will be here as a mayor, so let's just do it. And what he did, actually, he already achieved that in each Panevėžys school and children garden, there is a robotic course. Also, we are talking with industry people how we can combine our competencies in Vilnius and Kaunas, other cities, and to try to have a pilot test in Panevėžys manufacture plants, and many other things going on just because 5 people started building trust in the beginning.
Thank you, Edgar Ras. Sorry. I think that you are lucky and with having two persons now. One is the Lord Mayor, as I understand, who is now in favor of robotics, and your import, your secret weapon, a Danish person who understands, who brings in maybe some sort of Scandinavian community culture. I suggest that we open the discussion because time is running, and see if questions from the floor should be answered. Stay here, please, by all of us. Should we stay here? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, any questions from you? Any suggestions how to set up a funding program which takes care of social innovation, trust building in the favor of, let's say, robotics, digital innovation hubs, to the favor of people, to the favor of least advantaged?
Maybe I can respond to your questions earlier. We are participating already, like not as association, but personally, maybe for 8 years already in FP and Horizon projects. And what I see in general from various fields that very often there are some closed clubs of partners who know already each other and who are at excellence level in this field. And there are also a lot of new countries like we who are followers, although we have hungriness and agileness, I would say, in the process. And when there is some combination, I think really there can be some innovation in those funded projects. And I think that the European Commission in general takes a good direction trying to build all those digital innovation hub networks, and it doesn't matter how what's the word is used for that, or cluster, or digital innovation hubs, or networks, and so on. It means that some people with competence share that competence, and another people give completely different views to old problems.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah.
So what do you want? What do you suggest? What the European Commission should do?
I don't. I think one the whole discussion you presented is absolutely true, that it doesn't matter what the word is. What do we want to call it? The basic idea is that we want to foster innovation, and we don't want to push and go to SME and act as consultant and constantly. What we want is the naturally start the natural process of innovation in the regions of Europe. And for that, I think it's a long way So if we can, for example, Odense is a wonderful example, but we all know that where did it started from and how long history behind there is. So I think it's not the responsibility of EU. I think is the responsibility of the regions, and with the support from the EU, that it must be a long-term process. So I think that's it doesn't need to come in the form of money, but I think it has to come in the form of let's say they should be aware of your directions and policies so they can align with that, and actually that's happening. At least in our region, for example, in Tampere, a lot of people from our side go to them and talk to them, but they like more and they listen better when it comes from the Commission side, obviously. And I would say that what Edgar has said, that we need to think that where is the most need of the next initiatives. The previous, and as the word goes, actually that's what I was trying to point out, that now every European project is suddenly a network of digital innovation hub. But actually that's not what we are looking to continue in the future. I think we are looking to go forward. We don't want to keep the status going. We want to change the status quo of Europe, and that's what the European projects are about. So my idea is that in the next step, we need to go to the places where it's most difficult, where it's not happening, and where it needs to happen the most.
You know, I'm triggered by the word trust. When we were writing the proposal for the EIT KICS, and I was one of the main writers of the EIT digital proposal, trust was at the first page of of the discussions. Without trust, you cannot build an ecosystem. At the same time, we are now talking about the digital innovation hubs, and we are looking how we can create networks of digital innovation hubs, for example, in the pharmaceutical, in the medical sector or the healthcare sector and others. That means that you are talking about different worlds. And when you're talking about different worlds, the people have a problem quite often with each other because they speak different languages, and then trust is a problem. So the same when I'm looking to for example, Ireland. Ireland was at a certain moment investing heavily in PPPs. I was one of the members of the Impact Committee. The last group was selecting the 10 PPPs, and they were receiving each 50 million. And we were really looking to the team, the people. There was a hearing, because only when you saw how the people were working together, reacting to each other, how they were doing these things together, then you can see whether it was a team. What was worse, to receive your trust and receive the money. And paper is, you can write down everything on it, but you have to see the people, you have to talk with them. So indeed, trust is crucial, certainly for the digital innovation hubs when you cross border, and when you also go into different domains. But I don't know what it means for the selection process, because it's about people. And it's not simply to just, for me, the hearings were very important in Ireland to see whether I could believe that the story of the team.
Hi, can I have one or two issues to add? I'm from Poland, PIAP Institute, RTO, and I can. My two opinions to add to the subject. One is about the trust, and the thing that, in my opinion, is not working in Poland as it worked in Odense, probably, as far as I know. The thing that a lot of SMEs, companies, were spin-offs or spin-outs from the institutions, bigger, like DTI or something like this. And in Poland, it's not working like this. The SMEs are very often independent companies, not spin-outs of the bigger institutions, and it always helps to build a trust if you have something that was grown by the bigger institution that can later support it and so on. It's a little bit matter of historic reasons and how the trust in the society is working in such countries like Poland. But I think this is one of the aspects that can be somehow a little bit pushed by the, for example, Commission, and take a specific impact, because we have right now a lot of funding for SMEs in third parties supports and so on, but there is nothing like, okay, we support RTOs or academia to build their spin-outs. So we put a little bit of money to academia to build a company that will be separated from the academia at the end of the process. So there is a lot of potential in Polish academia and RTOs that cannot be used, that cannot use the funds that are already on the table. And the second thing from Polish perspective is also about this regional specialization and so on. The market in Poland is not that big, especially in the SMEs, and the SMEs are distributed all around Poland, which is not a one region. So it's very hard to find, like we have 3 big RTOs and academias working on robotics. But in the proximity of these RTOs, they do not have much SMEs. They should look at all around Poland, and it's working like this, but the conditions are that we should be very local, and this is not matching to our specifics of our... Yep.
When I'm looking to the SMEs, and that's certainly, I was board member for more than 10 years of an association of 190 SMEs, and I was at more than 100 SME startups started in my room. So, and the trust was always the worst. When the word they were talking about, when I was saying maybe Philips or other company is great for your product, then always the question came up, can I trust them? Because their technology, their idea was all they had in their hands. And as soon as they cannot trust the other partner, they are away, they are fade out. So therefore, I believe much more in an approach of regional digital hubs, because there is trust in that ecosystem, and then they can be supported to make the step, the big step, to the other countries where they don't know the people, where they don't know the situation, and that's something we have to support in our digital innovation hubs. Building trust in our ecosystem and giving them the support, and at the same time the wise old man has to be there to take care for a couple of things when they are playing in with the larger ones, hands-on business coaches, not just support, not just advice, hands-on business coaches, but okay.
Yeah, I just can agree.
It's very important to have, let's say, one suggestion is to have a better exchange of ideas and successful stories where trust is important, and maybe not only to researchers or members of industry, but also to administrators, to politicians, to members of the parliament. So to influence this background system, which trust is needed. So we are at the end of the session, and there's a coffee break now. So thank you very much for your participation, for being here. Thank you for Anna. Thank you for Edgaras.